Hello, I'm Sarma Krumins. I'm a glass artist based in London, and it's the 14th of November 2024. So your first question is about my background. So I grew up in a really small town near the Fens, so near Peterborough, Cambridge, Northampton area. But my family are actually originally from Latvia, and my grandparents came over as refugees after the Second World War. So I'm third generation in the UK. So I kind of grew up having a dual nationality or identity. So I had, came from a very traditional Latvian family, but then I grew up in England and went to school in England. So, I kind of always from a young age kind of struggled with that. And only in my later life that I've actually really embraced it and understood that it's given me such a different perspective, because I think by not being accepted by either culture fully, you're kind of then left in this middle bit where it can be quite lonely, and only a certain amount of people will really ever understand what that is. Although, it's not uncommon for, children of immigrants to feel like that. I think that, only a few people understand what it's like going to like Latvian Sunday school every week and things like that, and never really feeling that you fit in completely. But that, although I struggled with that at an early age, I really now appreciate the idea of the ability to look at things from a wider perspective. And I think only recently, when I say like a couple of years, I've become more and more interested in my roots, where I'm from, what that's about. And for a long time previously, I really wanted to be assimilated into Britishness, but always knowing that there was a big realization once when someone said, "But you are British," and I then immediately had this kind of knee-jerk reaction, but no, I'm not. And for so long I've wanted that, and then it was that realization that I will never be fully either, but I need to explore my Latvianness more, because I did reject it for a long time, and so it's been a real journey to relearn the language and kind of get to know it a bit more, and kind of get myself more involved in the community. So it's like a funny thing, isn't it, kind of being in between. But I think that this really does relate into a lot of my work, and the way I work as well. So, but I actually did grow up in a very creative household. Both my parents are, big readers, big thinkers, artistic in their own right. And they really encouraged me to explore the world, because I had a really hard time with other things like school and fitting in general. And so coming home was a real big sanctuary, and that was knowing now what I know, I realised that was such a huge privilege to have, and it's so rare to have that kind of upbringing. But it did give me the foundational blocks to then to go and explore and play. Even now, the idea of play is so important to me and my practice. So I kind of do cherish that time as being a really important time for me and my work. This is, I feel like my influences do change, but there are some things that keep going back to, right? And I think that really kind of cemented in my youth and in my early adulthood. So there are artists like seeing Tracy Emin's work for the first time as a teenager was really mind altering. She has been a great influence in my life, and then also watching her career as well, and her work, and has been always really look forward to see an exhibition of hers. But then also having kind of a conversation with Carrington and Hilma A.F. Klimt and Kiki Smith and Frida Kahlo, and like all these artists that you kind of just keep going back and keep revisiting their work. El Shigler was like a really big one, and still is. I just looked at him the other day and just thought, wow, amazing artist. But and I think it's kind of like you keep going back to people's work and because your experiences change, you kind of go back to it and you understand another bit about that work or that body of work or that one painting. You kind of really it's like a fun conversation to have. Film was also like a really big important I still love films and can quite happily sit for many hours in a cinema, which I have done. So I think that like people work, this kind of the idea of world building is like quite important, and I think that when you allow yourself to enter someone else's world is always a privilege, and it's always quite fun to explore. But yeah, I think when you're younger, that you kind of, they say that you develop your taste at a very young age, and I think that there's, to a certain degree, that is true. And then there are even bits of music that I listen to, it will take me straight back to a moment or a feeling, and it's actually a really useful tool to get into a thought pattern. For me, it's like if I'm trying to explore something, I will go and shift back into going back to saying hello to a few artworks, or go back to like institutions, like going to the Tate and walking around and then starting that process of thinking about work, and I think that's like a really like a nice way of starting a project, really. So we're on to question 3. What are you focusing in on right now? I am in the world of lamp working, so it's not necessarily a new skill of mine. I actually learnt it a couple of years ago, but I for a long time been working mainly with stained glass and drawing and painting, and then I really, and although I loved that stained glass line, that kind of graphic, really dark line that you can get from a solder, I really wanted to work more sculpturally, and like lamp working was a really was a way into that. So but due to the constraints of my studio, it's kind of a lot of it's like bead making at the moment, and kind of making these like very wearable projects, which I'm really enjoying, kind of having that interaction with like a sculptural piece with the body. And so I'm kind of very much in early stages of this new kind of techniques, and like looking forward to it. I have all these like great ideas for the next couple of months, but with the constraints of working, I'm not really sure how I need a kiln and things like that, so I'll see how that goes. But and just keep going back to drawing and painting, and kind of working out what I'm trying to say with everything at the moment. So kind of exciting times in the studio. I do kind of run to here every day, so that's a really nice feeling. So 4, what's the biggest challenge of being an artist? I think one of the biggest challenges of being an artist is actually just turning up, is really just showing up every day. It's sometimes I think people have this kind of romantic view of working in a studio, that you kind of, and you're really happily working, and it's very joyful and engrossing, and it is all those things, but it is also, I think, 80% frustration, anger, like but mainly frustration, like not quite getting what you want down or out into the world, what you're and So, I remember there was a time where I didn't show up to the studio, and that was really hard, and having this kind of real block. But the only way around those kind of things, those blocks, is to come in and start working, and then things start flowing, and you kind of like tap into that energy source. So yeah, I think that is one of the biggest challenges, is just turning up. Number 5, what advice would you give to your younger self? This is probably one of the hardest questions to actually answer, because I think that it's still relevant to, my advice is still relevant for me today, and that's like walking through the fear, and that kind of, it's like not, facing a fear of yours is kind of really important to then progress into your work, and whether that's like the big ones, like going through your subconscious and working out what's going on, and doing your shadow work, or it's like just setting up setting up my lamp worker and in the studio actually was a bit scary, because obviously this kind of it's quite a violent piece of equipment, and turning on this torch, and kind of the health and safety, so all these kind of things that can stop you, and because you're fearful of them. So I think for my younger self, it's just like try to embrace fear, and like if you are fearful of something, that's usually, and you're not gonna injure yourself, that's usually kind of a good indicator of like you're progressing. So that's my reply to that one. So number 6, have you ever tried any unconventional mediums or techniques? What I think is quite unconventional, only because I'll explain in a minute, is actually learning the basics, learning the essentials of what you need. So for lamp working, it's with bead making, it's like you have to learn how to center a bead, you have to learn how to layer on colors, there's certain things that you have to learn and should learn to be a good glass worker, a good lamp worker, and by doing that, having that kind of knowledge, you can then start to deconstruct, and then push the material. And I think that's kind of my unconventional take, because when I went to university, I went to quite a conceptual course, and they didn't really teach you about drawing, or we had a little bit of life drawing, but there was never really encouraged to like learn like skill sets, and I think I really missed that. And now in my practice, I actually always seek that. It's like, how do you make pigment? How do you make charcoal? How do you learn about perspective? Things like that. It's always been. So I think that's my unconventional take to how I work. But then with designing, I think it's more about being playful and kind of going big, and then reducing it down to the essentials. So like allowing yourself to go wild into the design process, to then refine and come back. And then when you're actually making the work, is making sure that you have the skill set to push yourself. So that's where I am with my work at the moment. So 7, do I have any music or background noise whilst I work? With noise or music within the studio, it really depends on where I am in the process. So if I need deep concentration and focus, then I really need something that won't distract me. So it will be like some very low key music. I have a couple playlists that I have, and that will help me get into work mode. Also there's kind of, also you have to have a kind of, what I enjoy is like having a small little ritual. So like having my coffee and in a certain way, and and then kind of like clearing the desk and then putting on that music, and then that indicates to everything that I'm about to do some like serious work. And then if it's something a bit more like muscle memory things, like making like a load of beads, or I really enjoy podcasts and audiobooks, and I actually enjoy a lot more of the like human voice more than music sometimes when I work, because I find music so emotive that it's just nice to kind of get involved in a conversation more so, or in another story, so it takes you out of yourself in some ways. So yeah, I have a lot of podcasts going when I'm kind of in another, so it really depends on what I need to do in that day or that hour, but there's a lot of hopping around from radio to podcast to audiobook to playlist to radio again to then a YouTube thing, and so yeah, it can be quite my history can be quite funny. So number 8, what's the best reaction someone has to your artwork? I recently received 2 emails from 2 different people, but pretty much the same day, and they both said the same thing, where they bought a piece of my work a couple months ago, and they've hung it in their house, and they've just wanted to say that it's just been like a moment of like joyfulness in their everyday, and that they really love it. And I think that's something that I really want to explore more, is like that kind of everyday piece of work that you can own and that you can have in your house. And I think that's really important, that you don't have to always go to a gallery to have that moment. You can actually have it in your kitchen window or you can wear it, and that's kind of like a really that's been a really nice reaction, and kind of very great. Like normally things just go out and I don't really hear much about it, or the only times that I really have an interaction with other people is on a market stall, if I do one, and so yeah, it's like a really nice, it's always nice to have a bit of feedback, even if it's negative. It's actually quite interesting. So yeah, I'm quite interested in how people react to my work, and it's always quite an interesting conversation. But yeah, those emails have been great and definitely pushed me forward to carry on. So number 8, what's the best? Oh no, sorry. Number 9, what do you hope people take away from your work? What I hope, I don't really hope that people take away anything really, because I do work for myself. So when I'm designing, I design really for myself, unless it's something that's kind of, so the jewelry's been quite interesting, because that's like, it's making sure that it's comfortable to wear for a long time, so that's kind of a different design thing. But I think, and then for certain projects you do want to have a certain reaction, but really I'm always surprised about what people respond to and why they respond to it. And I think that's kind of the joyful bit, is like you make work for yourself, and then you send it out, and then it's always interesting how people respond. So I don't really hope in anything, I just hope that they have a reaction. Sorry, the last question was number 9. So this is number 10. So this is the final one. So thank you so much for listening in, and thanks for having me, Stan. My social media handle on Instagram is Sarma-Works, so Sarma Works. And yeah, that's kind of my handle for most things. And yeah, thanks again, and looking forward to seeing the final outcome. All right, bye.